Well, I guess for those that were a part of NOCS, of course, no explanation is necessary. But for those that don't know what Nightmare on Chat Street was, it was a chat site available on mobile phones and the internet computers. And I started Nightmare on Chat Street on a Wednesday. I remember it was November 19th, 2005. And we had chat rooms and somewhat of a forum. The site was originally launched on a mobile community based out of Hagen, Germany. At the time it was called mcommunity.biz, which it later ended up changing its name to pepperoni.com. And of course the web address is nightmareonchatstreet.pepperoni.com. The shadow shell of that site still exists to this day, actually, if you go to that address. How was it received? Well, you know, to be quite honest, in the very beginning I wasn't sure exactly what I was doing. I didn't realize at the time that when I started constructing the site that I was actually building a chat site. I know that's hard to believe. It seems kind of odd, but that's the truth. And you know, the first night on November 19th, 2005, when we had our first night, we actually did very well. I think we had 30 or 40 chatters visit the site that night. And they came from all over, several states in the USA. I think there might have been somebody from Canada, and a lot of people from South Africa. Amazingly, Nightmare on Chat Street, it did well in the USA and in South Africa. I think those were probably the two largest markets for the site. And it was received fairly well. We had a nice family of people. Well, originally it was a one-man project. Yeah, I started it alone. I did all the building of the website and everything. And I pretty much ran the show single-handedly for the first couple of months. It was in December, I believe, if my memory serves me correct, I think it was December 9th, 2005, I appointed a chief administrator to the site to help me out with it. She was actually there at the opening night when the site opened in October. At the time she was using the name Yareli, and she had pretty much become a regular at the site, and she was enjoyable to talk to, and we really, all of us had a lot of good fun, and so in December of 2005 I decided to offer Yareli the position as the chief administrator of my site, basically to help me keep an eye on the chat rooms, and when troublemakers are in there, to delete their comments and things like that. And it was at that time that I coined the phrase Nightmare Diva, and the name caught on. Yareli, she liked the name, and so from that point on she went by the name Nightmare Diva, and so she helped out with that aspect of it. And we had another gal who was a regular chatter by the name of Siren. She was in South Africa, and she helped out with a lot of graphics. Some of the graphics and photos and pictures and stuff we used on the site were done courtesy of Siren. Well, the type of members it attracted, well, probably the average type members you would get with most chat sites. Of course, we would have a few troublemakers here and there along the way. But yeah, even though we had a lot of people from all around the world, from several different countries coming to chat, and yes, we did have some troublemakers that Nightmare Diva and I, of course, would be deleting the comments. We kind of formed like a small group, a small family. There was probably more than a handful of us. In fact, I'm going to say at one time there was probably about 20 of us that became kind of close, and we enjoyed chatting with each other on a daily basis. And every day we would, we would get together and chat, and so we had a nice little thing going. It wasn't the chat rooms weren't hopping all of the time, but it was well received, and we had a nice bunch of people. How popular? Well, I mean, I suppose if you were going to compare it to a lot of your major chat sites out there, like for example, Yahoo Chat, it wasn't real popular. I mean, we didn't have literally thousands and thousands of chatters like you would have with these big corporate type of chat sites. We were kind of like a mom and pop type of business. There were times when the chat rooms would be completely empty, and then there were other times when the chat rooms would be hopping, and we'd all be having a great time. So I guess for the 20 or 30 or so regulars at the site, yeah, it was popular for us. Of course, it was our meeting place. It was where we all sat around and just chatted, talked about anything. But it wasn't a world famous site or anything like that. It was kind of a mom and pop type of an operation. Yes, I did. I left the site because in June of 2006 I opened up a second site on mcommunity.biz. Well, actually it was pepperonity.com at that time. It was called The Haunting, and it was all about basically photos of real ghosts and the paranormal. And for a mobile WAP site on a mobile community like Pepperonity, it was relatively popular, and I managed the two sites for several months. And then in November 2006, the folks at the Pepperonity mobile community were making a lot of changes there. There were a lot of glitches. And at one point I finally decided that The Haunting, the paranormal website, wasn't getting the proper exposure that it deserved. And I think the clincher that made me finally do this was that also in November of 2006, the Pepperonity declared The Haunting as an adult site for adult content. And they began advertising pornography on the pages. Now, yeah, I suppose, the paranormal and ghosts and hauntings, it's not for some younger people that may not understand it. It could be considered an adult subject, but it's not adult in the sense of pornography. And these ads they were showing were showing disgusting ads. So at that point I decided to take the haunting off of the Pepperoni mobile network, and I started a new regular full-fledged website, www.ghosthauntings.org. I started that in November of 2006, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for the popularity that the site gained. Almost immediately after launching ghosthauntings.org, I was hearing from people all around the world, sending photos and asking for help. And before I knew it, the site had taken off and gotten so popular that I felt it was important that I start directing my time and energy towards ghosthauntings.org. And I soon found myself at a crossroads in which it was getting harder and harder for me to dedicate time to Nightmare on Chat Street and spend time in the chat rooms. And I juggled these two sites for actually a few months, until February of 2007. And by the time February of 2007 had rolled around, I had the site was so popular, I gave Nightmare Diva an option. I offered her ownership of Nightmare on Chat Street, that I would give her full ownership and full rights to the site. It would be her site from now on, and she would run the show and run the operation so that I could dedicate my time to ghosthauntings.org and the paranormal. So yeah, I kind of went into retirement there for a while, and so I was gone actually for a few months. Well, in the beginning, when Nightmare Diva took over the site in February of 2007, she had an online chat boyfriend. Diva lived in Las Vegas, Nevada, and she had met a man that by the name of Orange Fubar, who was in Great Britain, and they became online lovers. And so Diva had Orange Fubar assist her, and so they both started operating Nightmare on Chat Street together, and they were adding some new content to it, and it seemed to be going okay there for a few months. The problem was that Orange Fubar was a man with a very quick temper and a very hot temper. And when he would get angry, he would resort to destructive ways. And it seemed that Nightmare Diva and Orange Fubar were, it seemed like every other day they were having a spat, and they were fighting in the chat rooms. And they began making enemies with a lot of chatters and a lot of people on the Pepperoni network. And before you know it, the chat rooms started turning into pure drama. There was constant bickering and fighting and arguing. I popped in a couple of times, in the chat rooms and got an eyeful of some of the stuff that was going on. Nightmare Diva and Orange Fubar were making enemies with other site owners that also had WAP sites on Pepperoni, and it just kept escalating out of control. And it kept getting worse. In fact, it got so bad that at one point Diva and Fubar started closing the chat rooms when they weren't around. Of course, if they were there to monitor the chat rooms, the rooms would be open and everybody would be talking, but when they would leave, they would lock the chat rooms so that nobody could go in there. And so you know, and I got wind of this. I saw this, and I'm thinking, well, you know, what's the point of having a chat site if the chat rooms are closed down 50, 60, maybe even possibly 70% of the time, and people can't chat? It's kind of, you know, defeating the whole purpose. Well, as I said earlier, there was a lot of, you know, drama going on in the chat rooms at Nightmare on Chat Street, and Nightmare Diva had her online boyfriend, who went by the screen name Orange Foobar. Orange Foobar lived in Great Britain, and Diva lived in Las Vegas, Nevada. Well, they formed an online relationship, I guess you could say chat boyfriend and chat girlfriend. And during the months that Diva was running Nightmare on Chat Street, she went ahead and gave admin rights to her boyfriend, Orange Foobar, gave him the login information and password for the site. And, you know, they did some construction on the site, but Orange Foobar was a man with a very quick temper. He was a hothead. It didn't take much to set him off, and when he got angry, he would resort to destructive ways. And they were constantly fighting, you know, on and off all the time. And then they started making enemies with other people on Pepperonity, other chatters, as well as other WAP site owners that had WAP sites on the pepperonity.com mobile network. And a lot of drama was unfolding in the chat rooms, a lot of fighting and arguing, and it seemed like Nightmare Diva and Orange Foobar were fighting, it seemed like every other day. And it got so bad to the point that they started closing down the chat rooms when they weren't there, so that people couldn't come into chat rooms and leave derogatory messages and things like that. And of course I was beginning to get concerned about that at this point, because what's the point of having a chat site when your chat rooms are closed down for, you know, 50, 60, who knows, maybe even 70% of the time. They would close down the chat rooms when they weren't there. Well, the fighting, of course, between them, their rocky relationship continued on and on for a while, and finally one day in June 15th, 2007, actually, to be exact, I often referred to that as D-Day, because that was the day that Diva and Foobar had their ultimate fight. One day they were arguing in a chat room, getting into a knockdown, drag-out fight, and there were other witnesses in the chat room that witnessed it, and apparently at one point Diva decided she was not going to argue anymore, and so she said she was leaving the chat room, going away. Well, Orange Foobar posted in the chat room that she better come back and finish this argument with him right now, or he's going to delete Nightmare on Chat Street, destroy the site, and shut it down. And unfortunately, that wasn't an idle threat. Diva did not come back, and so moments later, Orange Foobar took it upon himself to delete Nightmare on Chat Street, completely destroyed the site, and it was gone. It didn't exist anymore. Well, I was downtown doing some shopping, and all of a sudden I got a text message from Nightmare Diva informing me that Orange Foobar had deleted the site, that it was gone now. It was no longer online anymore. Of course, you know, my heart sank into my stomach when I got the news, so of course I pulled out my cell phone and I went to nightmareonchatstreet.pepperonity.com, only to find that, yeah, it was gone. Nightmare on Chat Street was no more. The site had been deleted, it completely destroyed. All of the content we had on the site for the previous, 2.5 years, I think it was. I guess it was about 2 years. But it was all gone. It was destroyed, lost forever. So, at that point, I went ahead and I started Nightmare on Chat Street again. I went immediately to the Pepperoni Network and I got the Nightmare on Chat Street site back online. And at that point, I decided that I was going to come out of chat retirement and that I was going to try to help Diva rebuild the site and get it back to what it was. And so we did. We started on that same day, June 15th. And then, much to my surprise, the very following day, on June 16th, 2007, Nightmare Diva resigned as her position of the site owner. And so, bang, there I was once again. I was, operating the site single-handedly, by myself, a one-man show again. And so I had to come out of retirement, and I rebuilt Nightmare on Chat Street on Pepperoni and got it going back once again. Well, at that point I was once again, Nightmare on Chat Street was a one-man show once again, and I started, I rebuilt it and started hanging out in the chat rooms again, and eventually I met some new people. About a month later, in July of 2007, I met a chatter from the state of Alabama. She went by the screen name of Lucinda. We call her Lucy for short. And Lucinda and I developed a good friendship. We chatted for days and days at a time, and so I guess it was about a month after D-Day, in July of 2007, I went ahead and I assigned Lucinda as the chief administrator of NOCS, and she basically took over Diva's job. And we continued with the site on Pepperoni for a while, but at that point in time, in fact, I had been thinking about this for a very long time, for at least 6 or 7 months. I was unhappy with Pepperoni. There were just a lot of features missing that I really wanted. For example, you couldn't ban people from the chat rooms if you got a troublemaker in there. The only thing you could do would be to delete their comments. And I wanted more power. I wanted the ability to to ban the troublemakers and keep it a good, clean, fun atmosphere for everyone to enjoy. And so I began searching around for alternative sources, and eventually I found a chat room application, and we switched to that application. In fact, I still remember the date. It was July 24th, 2007. We still kept the site at Pepperoni, but what we did is we took the chat room application and we linked it to the Pepperoni site. So you could go to the nightmareonchatstreet.pepperoni.com, and then you could enter the chat room, and with this new application you had to register, and you were a member, and we had the ability to ban troublemakers and kick people out of the site, and also do things like block links to keep spammers out of the chat rooms and things like that. And so of course Lucinda was the chief administrator, and I hired a couple other folks another chatter by the name of Dead Nuns. He was in Red Bluff, California. We made him a moderator. And Siren, who I had mentioned earlier, from South Africa, we also made her a moderator as well. So, and I'm not sure, my memory escapes me at the moment, but another chatter from South Africa who was a regular at NOCS went by the name of Pugs. I seem to think I offered him a position as a moderator, but he turned it down. Just he was too busy. But anyway, you know, we had a few of us there so that we could pretty much monitor the site, monitor the chat rooms all the time, and when troublemakers would come along, we could, you know, get rid of them. The forums with this new application were 10 times better than what you had available on the Pepperonity site, and so it really went quite well. It you know, we had all these great features. You could upload MP3 songs and just a number of great things that you could do. We were really happy with it. Did I ever hear from Diva again? Well, for probably at least a good year or two after that, Nightmare Diva went over and she hung out with her online boyfriend Orange Foobar over at his Pepperonity WAP site. They would frequently, before we switched to the new chat application, they would always come over and try to cause trouble in our chat rooms. But once we got the new application with the ability to ban people, and we had records of their IP addresses and things like that, Nightmare Diva stayed away from our site. She was too afraid to register for fear that, you know, that she'd get banned, or that we would know her IP address and think that, you know, we're going to try to hack her or something, which is that's ridiculous. You know, we would never do anything like that. The last I heard of Nightmare Diva, I think it was about 2010, probably about the spring of 2010. She ended up building a couple of her own WAP sites on Pepperonity, and they've been abandoned since late 2010. They're still on Pepperonity, but she is no more. Missing in action. Nobody knows where she is. Yeah, she's gone. Yes. Actually, it was December of 2008. I launched NOCS TV, which stood for Nightmare on Chat Street Television, and it was an online internet television station. We aired real television shows like Bonanza, The Lucy Show, Democracy Now!, a lot of your public domain television shows like the Beverly Hillbillies and B-movies and things like that. It was really great. NOCSTV.net was the website, and I became very busy with that. It was taking up a great deal of my time, a lot of hard work, and NOCS TV was on the air. Our live programming was on the air from about 8 p.m. each night until about midnight, and then after that we would put everything into rotation and just keep repeating the shows throughout the wee hours of the morning, and a lot of times during the daylight hours we would air music videos. And the site was actually it was a very good channel. It had great potential, had some decent programming, and I was in the process of developing some locally produced television shows that we would host, and it was going really well. It really was. Unfortunately, though, after about a year and a half, I ran out of steam, and it became too much of a burden. And so after a year and a half of being on the air, I finally had to pull the plug on NOCS TV. That was probably about, I'm going to say, early to mid 2010, maybe the spring or summer of 2010. Lucinda, of course we called her Lucy for short, she was a great gal. She really was. She and I quickly developed a friendship at Nightmare on Chat Street, and we would spend hours and hours in the chat rooms and tending to the site, and we found that we had a lot in common. She really was a good gal. She was a hard worker, great friend. I have nothing but good things to say about her, and she really took her job seriously as being a chief administrator at NOCS. Like I said, I have nothing bad to say about her at all. She was, everybody loved her. We would sit for hours and hours at a time, and all of us got along so well. It was almost like a little family. Siren had actually been around Nightmare on Chat Street from pretty much the very beginning, late 2005, shortly after the site was launched. She became a regular at NOCS, and always had great conversation with her. She was in South Africa, very mature, very intelligent, great conversation. Everybody liked her, a really nice gal. we would always play jokes on each other sometimes, and it was the funniest thing because I remember one night I went in the chat room posing as some little kid that was looking for his mommy, and Siren was in there, and out of the kindness of her heart, she really thought that I was a lost child that was looking for his mommy, and so I said, "Are you my mom?" And of course Siren, she's, "Well, no, I'm not your mom." And I just started calling her mom, and great times. Always making jokes, and just a great person all around. And Siren did a lot of the artwork for NOCS, a lot of graphics, a lot of the stuff that we had, like the Nightmare News stills and all sorts of stuff. She was always contributing to the site, and like I said, eventually, she became a moderator for the site as well, and helped us keep an eye on things. I'm happy to say too that we still have contact. I'm here in America, she's still in South Africa, but thanks to social networking sites like Facebook, we still keep in touch, and a lot of fun. Pugs is another member from South Africa. I actually knew of Pug's existence way back from 2005 and early 2006. He also had a website on Pepperoni, and but I never really actually chatted with the guy until actually quite a bit later. I think it was more towards either late 2006 or early 2007 when Pugs and I started chatting and getting to know each other. Another exceptional, a great guy. Always fun to chat with. Good sense of humor. Lucinda and Siren and myself and Pugs and Dead Nuns and Rukia and Dark Spider, all these different chatters. We would all get together and Sub-Zero, and we would just chat for hours and hours and have a lot of fun. It's really interesting. It's funny how the internet can bring people clear across the entire other side of the world together, the way that it did with us. Great guy and a lot of fun. Sub-Zero, he was another regular from South Africa, and he was around actually since the very beginning as well. Late 2005 when NOCS began. He went by the name Sub-Zero. Sometimes he would abbreviate it and call himself Mr. SZ. I'll never forget one time with Sub. His real name was Chris, and so we do little things to try to trick each other every now and then. And one time I remember he came in the chat room using his real name as Chris, but he misspelled it. Instead of CHRIS, he spelled it, what was it, CHIRS, Churs, instead of Chris. And he just he played it along subtly to see if anybody would notice, and ironically, nobody noticed, or if they did, they just didn't say anything. Now, of course, I noticed, and I said something to him, and he says, "Yeah, shh, quiet. I'm trying to see, how many people will notice." Little subtle things like that. And I think he went the whole night like that with his name misspelled, just to see if anybody would notice. K2 snowboarder, and she later shortened the name to just K2, and that's what we referred to her as in the chat rooms. We always just called her K2. She was in Canada, and she would join in with our little group, our little family. I remember Lucinda and myself and K2. And we also had another young girl. She's only about 14 years old. Went by the screen name of Rukia. We would sit there and chat for hours, and although it's been a few years, I don't remember the exact details. I always remember that Lucinda, Rukia, and K2 were going to live in a cardboard box on the side of the highway. I don't even know what it was about. But that's one of the things that I do remember. And she participated regularly, and we got to watch K2 grow. She was with us for a couple years, and she was in her teenage years, and went through some lifestyle changes. And so, once again, it's kind of like a family. You get to watch each other grow and move on and go on to bigger and better things. And I still have contact with her as well, thanks to, of course, Facebook. So, we still keep in touch. Dead Nuns was was another gem at NOCS. Actually, I've known Dead Nuns since childhood, since the age of about 5 or 6 years old. So, at this point, Nuns and I, we've been friends for 45 years now. And he came along. At one point in time, I invited him to NOCS, and he came along, and he was a regular all the time. And he would also join in the great chatting that we did, with Lucinda and the whole gang. In fact, for a while there, in 2008, I launched nightmareonchatstreet.com, and along with the chats and the forums, we also had other features on there, like movie reviews. And Dead Nuns actually did some movie reviews for the website. So not only was he a chatter, but he also would give his thumbs up or thumbs down about movies, and and eventually he did become an admin of the site. He became a moderator. In fact, I still remember the night he got to ban his very first person, his very first troublemaker, and Nuns got to ban him. And then again, I still have contact with him like I have for the past 45 years. I have a lot of guilt feelings about Dark Spider. She was around pretty much since the beginning of NOCS, and she was also a WAP site owner. She had her own WAP site on the Pepperoni Network. But unfortunately, as well as Dark Spider and I got along, she and Nightmare Diva did not get along. I don't remember what started it all or where it began, but they got into a big fight, and Nightmare Diva, she was basically just a drama queen. And the reason why I have guilty feelings towards Dark Spider is because at one point I actually visited Dark Spider's WAP site and went into her chat room, and lo and behold, there's Nightmare Diva in her chat room, calling her every name in the book, insulting her, just saying some of the most horrible things that a person could say. And I could tell that this really distressed Dark Spider. She was not happy about it. And I feel guilty about that, because even though I didn't have anything to do with it, and I certainly didn't condone what Diva was doing, going around, starting trouble like that, I still in some way felt responsible, because Diva was my chief administrator of the site for a while. But I think deep down inside, I think Dark Spider knows that, and she understands. And I don't think that she has any resentment towards me because of what Diva did. Dark Spider and I, we still have contact to this day. We get to see each other on Facebook all the time, and I value her friendship, and I'm glad to be able to call her a friend. Dumbass. Well, originally, Dumbass, he and I lived in the same building in Washington State. That's how we met each other. And, once he learned that, that I owned and operated a chat website, he was interested in chatting. And he didn't really know much, if anything, about chatting at the time. And I explained to him that, a lot of people use nicknames. And, he wasn't really sure, he couldn't really think of a name to use. And so I said to him, I said, well, don't you have a nickname? Is there is there a nickname people have given you? Did they call you a certain nickname in high school or growing up? And he thought about it for a minute and he says, yeah, a lot of people called me dumbass. And of course I said, well, me personally, I'm not sure I would want to use that nickname for myself, but I said, if you're comfortable with that name and you like it, well, go for it. And so dumbass he became. Dumbass was there, and he showed up after we got the new chat format in late 2007, and he was around there for a good year and a half or so, and he would chat when he got the chance. I'll never get over that name. Barbie, Barbie actually, well, she started out as Barbie, and it was funny because in our photo gallery, where we had a lot of our pictures of our chatters in there, her photo was an actual picture of the Barbie doll. She was known as Barbie for a while, and then she ended up eventually changing her name to Vampire Goddess. She was around in the very beginning, not so much there towards the end, but she would pop her in around. I knew Barbie, aka Vampire Goddess, from a previous chat site prior to Nightmare on Chat Street, a Canadian chat site called Air G. And that's how she and I met. And then eventually, when I opened NOCS, then she would come and chat with us too. Had a lot of interesting chats with the Vampire Goddess. Some too bizarre to even talk about, but she's a good gal. And once again, Nightmare Diva did not like Vampire Goddess either. Nightmare Diva really had issues with some other female chatters, but no complaints here. I always valued Vampire Goddess as a friend, and I think that Diva kind of held some animosity towards me because of that. Because Diva didn't like her, Diva didn't want her on the site, and I stood up to Diva and told her, basically leave her alone. So she's a good gal. There are no known pictures online anymore of Nightmare Diva. There is one existing picture, but it doesn't even really show her face. She's basically almost nude. She was showing off a new tattoo on her inner thigh. Other than that, there are no real actual photos of Nightmare Diva. I used to have some years ago, but I don't anymore. And I think that once she left Nightmare on Chat Street, the thing about Diva, if you didn't know her, is that she was a hardcore major drama queen. She was one of those people that just lived for the drama. Even when she was my chief administrator, I was constantly having to coach her and tell her, calm down, don't get so irate, don't get so mad, but she was she had a lot of issues with a lot of people, and when after D-Day happened, after they destroyed NOCS, Diva turned on me. And you know, I guess really the only way I can describe it is a feeling of utter betrayal, because I gave Diva the key to the website. I let her run the show. At one time I even let her be the owner for a short time until she destroyed it. And then to have her turn around and turn on me, you know, her boyfriend in Great Britain, Orange Fubar, he pretty much did a good job of brainwashing her, putting a lot of ideas in her head about me, that I was some sort of a control freak, and yeah, just that I was using her as a token for the website. And unfortunately, Diva bought into that. She bought all that. She believed all that. There was a time or two when I explained to her, look, you're blowing this way out of proportion. If you want to leave NOCS and go be with your, online boyfriend, that's fine. You do that, but don't burn your bridges behind it. Don't start any wars. But being the drama queen that she was, and easily influenced the way that she was, she completely turned on me. She turned on Nightmare on Chat Street. And after all that I had given to her, all that I had done for her, and all the trust and the faith I had put into her, even after her boyfriend Orange Fubar destroyed the site, I stuck by Nightmare Diva's side, and I gave her the encouragement that we were going to rebuild the site, that it was going to, that we were not going to let this stop us. And to have her turn around, slander me the way that she did, make the insulting comments the way that she did, her and Orange Fubar, they wrote pages about me on their website about just anything you could possibly imagine, and then they said some pretty hurtful things and some pretty unbelievable things. And it's a shame, because in the beginning things were really great with Diva and I, but as time went on, I realized that she was a problem, and then when she turned on me, the total betrayal, that was pretty much the end of it. And I haven't had any contact with her. Oh God, it's been years. And as far as I know, she's kind of missing in action. She's no longer on Pepperonity anymore. She does have some websites on there that she built back in 2009 and 2010, but she hasn't logged into them since mid to late 2010. So, unfortunately, you win some, you lose some. And in this case, well, Diva lost it. Hunk 007, he was pretty much around in the early days, late 2005, early 2006 at NOCS. He lived in South Africa. We had a lot of members from South Africa. And at one point in time, he was actually Nightmare Diva's chat boyfriend. This was before Orange Fubar and all of that stuff. He and Nightmare Diva had a chat relationship, even though she was in Las Vegas and he was in South Africa. I always got along with the guy. We always had a few good laughs here and there, and we still have contact every now and then through Facebook. But there was a lot of drama between he and Diva. I'm not sure who is to blame for it, or perhaps maybe they're both to blame, and I guess it doesn't really matter, because it's all history now. But yeah, Hunk 007 was, he was a regular there for a while, and from what I understand now, he's married and has a family, and he's doing quite well. I used to always call him Defy. It wasn't until several years later that I realized that D-E-F-Y spells defy. Defy or Defy or whatever you want to call it. He was around since the very beginning. He was actually Siren's boyfriend. He was also in South Africa. I always got along with him well, and he also owned some WAP sites on Pepperoni. But Defy was a very jealous man. And you know, like I said, he and Siren were boyfriend and girlfriend at one time, and Siren's an attractive woman, and so whenever anybody would come in the chat room and make any kind of compliment to Siren, you know, that she's a pretty gal or anything like that, of course, Defy would get real angry, very angry. And it was kind of funny because I know that for a while there he was keeping an eye on Siren, and Nightmare on Chat Street was one of the turfs that he watched over because he loved her so much and everything. Now he and Siren did split up quite some time ago. I think the last time I had contact with Defy or Defy, whichever you want to call it. Actually, it was about early 2007, I think. By the time we had gotten the new chat rooms with all the new features, the new chat applications in the summer of '07, I really didn't have much contact with him anymore. I don't know where he is or what he's doing. He's one of the ones that I lost touch with. Well, as I said earlier, NOCS, we were a small-time operation. We didn't have funding and backers like a lot of your major corporate commercial chat sites out there that have. So there were times of when things would be really quiet, inactivity, but it was usually only a few hours here and a few hours there. The handful or 20 or 30 or so of us that were regulars there, we would always manage to meet up and have our hours worth of chat sessions there. I think when it started to become noticeable that that NOCS was on the decline was in 2009. As I said, in December of 2008, I started directing a lot of my attention to the online television channel NOCS TV, and it was requiring a lot of my time, hours and hours and hours, getting it off the ground. And on top of that too, I was working a full-time job, 40 hours a week. And so for a while there, while I was working on the television station, there were a lot of times when I just simply wasn't there at NOCS because I was busy. And I remember in late 2009, Lucinda and I were talking, and I was telling her that it seems that the site is dying, that we're losing a lot of activity, that we go for hours and what seemed like days at a time with nobody around. I mean, at some points it was almost like being in a ghost town. You could see tumbleweed blow through the room. It was that bad. And by this time, by late 2009, Lucinda had pretty much stopped frequenting the chat rooms, and I was talking to her about that, and I was trying to, coach her into getting back into the chat scene and spending more time in the chat rooms. And I told her, I said, I'm going to start. I know I've been gone a lot, but I'm going to start spending more time in the chat room myself. And Lucy told me, she said, ever since you started that television station, you've been spending all of your time with that, and you're never around in the chat rooms anymore at NOCS. She said, why should I come back and start frequenting the site when you were gone a lot of the time? And they say hindsight is 20/20. And looking back retrospectively, Lucy was right. That was, that was something I had to come to terms with. She was right. I had been neglecting Nightmare on Chat Street. She even told me that she would sit in there for hours and hours, in the chat room by herself, waiting for me to show up, and I would never show up. And and I explained to her at that point that, I realized I'd been gone a lot, but that's going to change. I'm going to start spending more time in the chat rooms now. And Lucy basically told me, it's too late. It's gone too far, too little, too late. You can't reverse what you've done. And she was right. Lucy was right. And that was about the time, about late 2009, that it became pretty obvious to me that maybe our 15 minutes of fame were over. The spotlight that was shining over us is slowly beginning to fade away. And in December of 2009, Lucinda resigned as the chief administrator at Nightmare on Chat Street, and she stopped showing up at the site. She abandoned it, and it was a loss, but she was right, and perhaps I am to blame for that. After Lucy resigned in December 2009, it was obvious that the days of good chat were over. I spent some time trying to revive it. I hung out in the chat rooms there for weeks, hoping people would show up, and they stopped showing up. The site was completely dead. It was abandoned. No activity at all. And I realized that our days of chatting, we had a good 4 or 5 years, but those days were over. So in January of 2010, I closed down the chat rooms, and I decided I was going to take NOCS in a different direction. Instead of being a chat site, I was going to concentrate more on things like the movie reviews, news and public information that people would find interesting. And also I even embedded the television player from NOCS TV on the website for a while. I decided that if we weren't going to be a chat site, I was going to do something else with the site. Start exposing scams and all sorts of different stuff. I had a lot of ideas. Unfortunately, one of my flaws is that I sometimes try to take on more than I can handle. And of course I was still juggling NOCS TV at that time. Eventually NOCS TV ran out of fire. There just wasn't enough of me to go around. I was beginning to get worn down, and I needed help, and I couldn't get the help, and it wasn't something that I could do on my own. And I ended up pulling the plug on NOCS TV. The station went dark. That was in the spring of 2010. After being on the air for a year and a half, Nightmare on Chat Street Television was no more. And of course, my paranormal career and my paranormal website, ghosthauntings.org, which has been a very popular website since the inception back in 2006. In fact, it's one of the top paranormal websites on the internet. I'm very proud of that, and it demands a lot of my work. Being a paranormal researcher and paranormal investigator, I launched the Paranormal Research Alliance in 2010, where we are a local team of investigators, and we go out and we investigate hauntings and deal with ghosts and things like that. And I always had it in the back of my head that I was going to take Nightmare on Chat Street in a new direction with all kinds of new content, but unfortunately over time it just didn't materialize, and the magic was lost, the magic was gone. And finally in 2012, after having a dispute with Microsoft, which hosted nightmareonchatstreet.com, a bad business decision ensued, and nightmareonchatstreet.com went offline on April 26th of 2012. Although the Pepperoni site still exists to this very day as kind of an empty shell, as just something to remember NOCS by. NOCS is dead. All good things must come to an end sooner or later, and Nightmare on Chat Street finally met its death. Well, I'm proud of what we managed to do during that time. Met a lot of great people, had a lot of great times. And it lasted for a few years. From October of 2005 through late 2009. That's about 4 years of chatting. A lot of good times. Um, many of us became very close at Nightmare on Chat Street. You know, almost like a family. We shared the good times and the bad times. We had our moments when we were happy. We had our moments when we were sad. We laughed together. We cried together. And I am so lucky that I had that time with those people, because they enriched my life. A dream came true with NOCS, and you know, I have no regrets. And if I had the chance to do it all over again, who knows? I probably would. Nothing but good memories. And even though we had some bad times and some drama, you know, when you bond with people the way that we all bonded, and you have the times together that we had, it's almost like family. And it was sad to see it end, but at the same time, I think we're all richer and wiser for having had those experiences. I guess if I had to sum it up in just a few short words, the song by Green Day comes to mind. The verse in a song I'll quote, "It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life." Thanks for the memories. To delete their comments and things like that. And it was at that time that I coined the phrase Nightmare Diva. And you know, the name caught on. Ureli, she liked the name, and so from that point on, she went by the name Nightmare Diva. And so she helped out with, you know, with that aspect of it. And we had another gal who was a regular chatter by the name of Siren. She was in South Africa, and she helped out with a lot of graphics. Some of the graphics and photos and pictures and stuff we used on the site were done courtesy of Siren. Well, the type of members it attracted, Well, probably the average type members you would get with most chat sites. Of course, we would have a few troublemakers here and there along the way. But yeah, even though we had a lot of people from all around the world, from several different countries coming to chat, and yes, we did have some troublemakers that Nightmare Diva and I, of course, would be deleting the comments. Well, I guess for those that were a part of NOCS, of course, no explanation is necessary. But for those that don't know what Nightmare on Chat Street was, it was a chat site available on mobile phones and the internet computers. And I started Nightmare on Chat Street on a Wednesday. I remember it was November 19th, 2005. And we had chat rooms and somewhat of a forum. The site was originally launched on a mobile community based out of Hagen, Germany. At the time it was called mcommunity.biz, which it later ended up changing its name. We kind of formed like a small group, a small family. There was probably more than a handful of us. In fact, I'm going to say at one time there was probably about 20 of us that became kind of close, and we enjoyed chatting with each other on a daily basis. And every day we would, we would get together and chat, and so we had a nice little thing going. It wasn't the chat rooms weren't hopping all of the time, but it was well received, and we had a nice bunch of people. How popular? Well, I mean, I suppose if you were going to compare it to a lot of your major chat sites out there, like for example, Yahoo Chat, it wasn't real popular. I mean, we didn't have literally thousands and thousands of chatters like you would have with these big corporate type of chat sites. We were kind of like a mom and pop type of business. There were times when the chat rooms would be completely empty, and then there were other times when the chat rooms would be hot. Well, originally it was a one-man project. Yeah, I started it alone. I did all the building of the website and everything. And I pretty much ran the show single-handedly for the first couple of months. It was in December, I believe, if my memory serves me correct, I think it was December 9th, 2005, I appointed a chief administrator to the site to help me out with it. She was actually there at the opening night when the site opened in October. And at the time she was using the name Yareli, and she had pretty much become a regular at the site, and she was enjoyable to talk to, we really, well, all of us had a lot of good fun, and so in December of 2005, I decided to offer Ureli the position as the chief administrator of my site, basically to help me keep an eye on the chat rooms, and when troublemakers are in there, to pepperoni.com. And of course the web address is nightmareonchatstreet.pepperoni.com. The shadow shell of that site still exists to this day, actually, if you go to that address. How was it received? Well, you know, to be quite honest, in the very beginning I wasn't sure exactly what I was doing. I didn't realize at the time that when I started constructing the site that I was actually building a chat site. I know that's hard to believe, it seems kind of odd, but that's the truth. And you know, the first night on November 19th, 2005, when we had our first night, we actually did very well. I think we had 30 or 40 chatters visit the site that night, and they came from all over, several states in the USA. I think there might have been somebody from Canada, and a lot of people from South Africa. Amazingly, Nightmare on Chat Street, it did well in the USA and in South Africa. I think those were probably the two largest markets for the site, and it was received fairly well. We had a nice family of people.